Jan, I do remember the first question I had on my list of questions. You know, Mitford, at home in Mitford, we haven't caught on, turns 30 years. Jan has been a published author for 30 years. I want you to take us back to that moment when you typed the word A on a typewriter.
So I was 4 years old, and my family, my grandparents, who raised my little sister and myself, were moving from a house on the Lenore Hickory Road, as we call it then. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So the movers came, and I was too little to understand where we were going or why or what this was about. And these men get in the house and they're tearing it up and they're putting stuff in the truck, and I was nervous about this, and I was underfoot. So my grandmother said, "Bring Helen's typewriter up and let Jan play with it," or I was Janice to my grandmother. So I had never seen that typewriter. As I recall, it was a Smith Corona, a big old clackety-clack thing, and I just thought it was gorgeous. They set it down on the porch on the top step, and they rolled in a sheet of paper for it. Well, because the typewriter had been in the basement for who knows how long, the silk ribbon was rotted. But it's still, when I pressed the A, I thought, you know, orderly, I was an orderly child. Disorderly now. But I pressed the A, and I saw that hammer go up and strike the page and fall back. And there was an A. It was so beautiful. I remember now my great wonder that such a thing could have happened, that I made happen. I made happen. So many years later, I went through advertising, spent decades in advertising, and that was great because it prepared me to write fiction. There's a joke in there which and I'd always wanted to be a writer since the age of 10. I knew that's what it was for me. I just didn't know how to write a book, but I did try at the age of 10 to write a book, and the lead character was named Karon. She had an 18-inch waist. I had read on with the wind. Anyway, finally, I left advertising 25, 30 years ago, moved to the mountains in North Carolina, and started writing my novel. And I'm moving through the end in a minute.
This is great, you know.
And I thought I was writing a novel about a woman who moved to the mountains of North Carolina and opened an inn. Because by running an inn, you could have a whole parade of people come to it. I was looking for a pair of eyes that would see a lot of people, because I wanted a lot. I must be part Russian because I like a lot of characters in it. But it wasn't worth it. This book would not come alive for me. Struggle as I did. And so one night, lying in bed, I had this image of a short, overweight, balding man walking down a village street. I just saw his back. When he turned around in my imagination, he was wearing a collar. And so a priest would see all these people. Mm-hmm. A parade of people would continually pass by a priest. You ought to have done a bartender. give you the opportunity to go inside his head. You get to know this man as well almost as you know your husband. I mean, we know what he thinks, we know what he eats, and what his ambitions are, and how he feels. We especially know how this character feels. So he's easy to become familiar with and to become, I hope, your friend as you read the books. Did I answer?
That was fantastic. And I'm conjuring my questions. I love that I have time. Which brings up the question. You came to writing a little bit later than a lot of authors do, but you clearly had a burning desire to be a writer. How did it stay with you all those years? And what was it like when you finally wrote those magic words, "Beginning"?
Well, I think it stayed with me all those years because that's what I was put on the planet to do. Now, I never thought I would be put here to write about one at a time. I mean, is this going to be my entire ooze? I'm going to write about it a little bit. I tried recently to write another book, but it wouldn't work, so I went back and I thought, I'm happy when I'm writing about Mitford. So I said I would never do this again, that I had told all of the story, it was all wrapped up. Some of you said, no, you left it really dangling. But when I started writing this new book, I was crying, I was laughing, I was under the skin of my characters. And I realized how much they meant to me, and how much I still wanted to deal with their lives. What was the question?
What's the question? You had that burning desire to write, and you stuck with it. And your answer was perfect, was that was what God made you to do. You couldn't get rid of it. What were, when you did first have those books come out, and, I love the way people see an overnight sensation, and that overnight sensation typically took many years to happen. Was it challenging in those first early days when that first book released, and you were hand-selling it across the country?
I was as poor as a church mouse, as my grandmother would say, during the writing of the first book. I had left advertising. I had some small savings. Well, just to give you, just for fun, I'll tell you I had $8,000 in the bank, which I had saved from an award I had won in advertising. Now, you can go through, even 30 years ago, you can go through $8,000 in a hurry. But my house payment was only like $462. And every month, I never really knew where that house payment might come from. But it was always provided. On time. On time. So those years when I was trying to write a book and had failed at writing a book where the characters would get off the page and become real, I didn't know what I was going to do. I honestly thought about bagging groceries at Food Lion. Because when you're really desperate, you're going to think more broadly. But God kept providing. And I kept dreaming that I could become a writer. That's all I wanted to do or be. I never wanted to be anything else. Maybe a singer.
There's still time.
So I just stuck to it. It was a long obedience in the same direction. Every author, needs to learn what Nietzsche wrote. A long obedience in the same direction. This is even when you're tired, even when you're discouraged, even when you think you cannot possibly do this. It's a long obedience in the same direction that will work with prayer. With prayer. Bathe your efforts to become an author in prayer. I highly advise that. So, the early years were hard, but when I was able to hold that first book in my hands, and I remember it clearly, it came out in paperback. I wanted hardcover. I mean, I was going for hardcover. Okay, and I advise you to do that. But I was so glad. I remember going out on a little deck at my house in Rolling Rock and just holding it over my heart. And then because I had a very small publisher who didn't know what to do with it, there was no real distribution. You can write a book, but getting it distributed, that's a whole other very key thing, right? So I decided I would just distribute it myself. And I had to give up my good car to move to Rolling Rock to write a book. And so for a while I was driving a friend's car. It was a very early model. I can't even remember what make. Had rust on the fenders. It's kind of embarrassing, but I had to do it. So I would put my book in the trunk of the car, my books in a box, and I would go around the bookstore. And I would introduce myself. Oh, I'm Jan Karon. Nobody, of course, had heard of Jan Karon. And this is my book. Do you have it? And of course they didn't. And I said, well, would you just put a few, I would go to Barnes & Noble. Would you just put a few copies on the shelf? Well, they would. They probably wouldn't today, but they did then. Because box stores back then were still pretty new and they didn't know what to do. So they took my books. But here's what happened. The independent bookstores, God bless them, everyone, made Mitford what it is. They were the fertilizer. They hand-sold the heck out of this book. They finally had a book that they could sell to anybody of any age. Men, women, young people. I just talked with a reader who's here today that her 14-year-old daughter, I believe, there she is, yes, 14-year-old daughter was reading the books, and that's how she got started. So,
that's good. Talking about the bookstores, good for all ages, and the independent bookstores. You know, today I am still a huge advocate of independent bookstores. Let's give a little round to Ty Brooks. They're the ones promoting the local authors. They're the ones with the booksellers who know about the books and who are lifting up amazing books that you might not have heard of otherwise. And I would say, tell me if I'm wrong, that a lot of your success was rooted in those bookstores.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm acknowledging them again in the books, in the novel I'm writing now, the 15th Mitford novel. You know, there's always a page or two for acknowledgments. And I'm including them because they helped make Mitford what it is today. They loved it. They fell in love with it. It was nominated for an A. And I forgot what that stands for, but it's the American something or other booksellers. 3 times. And that had never happened before, and it has not happened again. Because they could sell it over such a broad demographic. And that, I try to give you a clean book. I try to give you a happy book. I try to give you a book with trouble and resolution. I try to give you tears. I try to give you laughter. I promised you that I would not give you language. However, in novel number 15, I am going to use the word damn. So if you have any problems with that,
Brace yourself. But Jan, you have used that word once before.
I did, and I got a whipping for it. Well, so here I was 10 years old, 2 miles from here. I mean, this is my old school. And I was 2 miles, you couldn't even see another house. I mean, you had to swing in on a vine to get to my house. And,
That you would use the word damn.
yeah. So I had seen Gone with the Wind.
Oh,
And can you imagine being 10 years old and seeing Gone with the Wind? I mean, that was, what was my little mind to do with all that information? But I was deeply moved and troubled and curious. So I thought, I'm just going to read that book. Well, you know, I did. And so under the covers with a flashlight, I read almost all of Gone with the Wind. My grandfather disapproved of book learning. If he had caught me reading that book, he would have taken it from me. So that's why I read it under the covers, and it was more delicious for that.
It's the word that you use.
So in the end, Red Butler famously said, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. And I thought, I could use that in a novel. I was only 14 pages at that time, and I thought, I bet that would sell. I was already in the market. So I put it in with my little number 2 lead pencil on a blue horse notebook paper. I wrote in there. And I hid it in the little vanity that my sister and I shared in our bedroom. She found it. She read it. I know Mary Jo is her business partner. My little sister comes into the kitchen one morning, and she says, Mama, Janice wrote a book, and it's got damn in it. My grandmother looked at me and she said, go out there and get me a little switch and make it a little steam switch. How many of you were ever switched? All right, it's the steamer who gets worse. So you have to go out and get your own switch and you have to strip it.
yes.
And you take it very humbly to the person who's going to use it on you. And that's why I'm going to use damn in this next book.
The Sandy's not around to tell you not. Well, as you mentioned, you are once again writing what you said you would not, under any circumstances, write the 15th Mitford novel. Has the writing process changed for you over 30 years?
Well, that's a good question, Sarah. It has, actually, with this book. I have always written in a linear way. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3. It never occurred to me to do it in any other way. But when I started writing this book, I knew I had to do it in chunks. And it could not be, wasn't necessarily linear. I would get an idea, I would hear the voices of the characters speaking. They're speaking, Harley's talking, and I've got to go in there and sit down and capture this scene, or it'll be gone. And then Father Tim, and then Cynthia. We're looking back into Cynthia's life. You know that she tried to commit suicide. Why? Now we know why. It's a sad story, but it's a good story, and it needs to be told. We're going to look more deeply into the characters. I think we're going to laugh more as well. I think we're going to laugh more, cry more. It's just a more kind of a book. Because as far as I know, this really could be my last book.
I love that you say this really could be my last book. You notice that she's no longer saying this is my last book. She's learned that she could be there. Well, it's been a few years since you sat down to write, since you had a deadline, since you had chapters to get out. How does it feel different now? You were churning them out pretty quickly for a long time.
In the first few years, I was writing a book a year. And then within that year, I had to go through the copy edits about 4 or 5 times. That's a very arduous task. And then I had to get on a plane, fly to New York, and record it. All within a year. But I was young, and I could do it. But it was highly stressful. Now I don't want to do any of that. I just want to let me write my book. I have a little sign that hangs on my doorknob, do not disturb. The time has come because I have a deadline for this novel. The time has come to put that on my front door. And the nice people who want to bring me hydrangeas, which I love, or drop off a baked good, or just want to talk, I just can't do it. I've got to get down to my work. And when I'm not working now, I like this book so much that I want to be with it. I want to be with my book. I want to be with my people. Harley has always been a faithful character. But I've just fallen in love with Harley all over again. And the way he speaks, and I'm writing a love letter, by the way, to all of you. If indeed this is my last book, I want to reach out to my readers and just thank you for your loyalty over the years. Thank you for getting what I do. Thank you for appreciating the fact that I spent a long obedience in the same direction to give you a story I hope you'll love. So I have no idea where to go.
Well, no, that was great. That leads into the next question I wanted to ask. Writing is a time-consuming labor. It's joyful, and there's so much pleasure in it, but it is time-consuming. It's labor. It's going to the salt mine someday. What do you put into your book? What does it take out of you that ends up on the page that then blesses readers?
I have to tell you that most times when I have written for several solid hours, I'm so exhausted that I can weep. I just give it all because I don't think there's any other way to give it. You give it all. And even though I'm having a good time, even though I'm laughing out loud, it is hard manual labor. I call it manual because you're using this a lot, and then that gets all. You all know about that. It even affects your left hand. I mean, I'm right-handed, so why should my left hand be affected? I have no idea. And then I hunch over. I have terrible posture. And then I sit on the very edge of my chair. My chair has a metal band that I sit right on that band, like a crazy person. And I pay for it later because my body has been really mistreated. Nobody's fault but mine. So there's a sense in which writing, which is a brain activity, is highly manual. It involves our shoulders, our neck, arms, wrists, thumbs, and it actually feels pretty good to know that I worked that hard. He just said, yeah, Janice, you did a good job today. Okay, you can go to bed now.
Well, we talked a little bit about Gone with the Wind. I want to know what book inspired you most. Maybe that one, but what book do you think most affected or impacted you as a writer?
Well, I've told the Lorna Doone story so many times. I will try to hurry through that.
I don't think anybody here's in a hurry.
This is another one that Mary Jo's heard about 40 times. Mary Jo is as many of you know, is a Mitford scholar. I've had to call her several times.
Well, we don't know the answer. We call Mary Jo.
It's like, Mary Jo, what color are Lace's eyes? Or what cigarette did Buzzard or smoke? I mean, I can't remember all that. So she'll look, and then I'll call our bookstore and ask her, and she'll look it up, and what I need is a concordance.
Which I think Mary Jo might write one day. The book that most impacted you as a writer.
So Lorna Doone was the first book ever recommended to me by a librarian. We had a library here at Hudson School, but it was very small. And I don't remember, maybe I read everything I thought I had, but one Saturday, I was 10 years old, my grandfather took me to Lenore, to the barber shop, and which I always loved, by the way. You know, that's really sort of how I learned what men talk about. It's mostly baseball. In Lenore, in the 30s, it was baseball. It would be football today, probably, I don't know. But I wanted to go to the library, and I had never crossed a city street before. So my grandfather walked me out to the sidewalk, and we watched the light turn green so I could cross. I was terrified. And I run up the hill to the library, which was, at that time, huge. 25 years later, very small. And so I didn't really know, I've never been in a real library, I didn't know about what's that system? The million-decimal system. I went to that cabinet and I couldn't figure out exactly what to do. And a librarian said to me, "My dear, I know just what you're looking." She gave me Girl of the Limberlost and Lorna Doone. So I just ran out of there like a little rabbit, across the street to the First Methodist Church. Does anybody in here know the First Methodist Church in Lenore? It's gorgeous. It has a dome. It's a very ambitious piece of architecture. And I sat on the front steps and I opened the cover of Lorna Doone, and it began to speak to me. And I was just this is what I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to read words, and then I wanted to make words about Jesus. So I would say that was the start of the inspiration to become a writer. Oh, what books? So many. When somebody asks you the question, well, like, what are your favorite books? You have an immediate answer. Well, and I don't ever have an immediate answer. I keep making a list. I'll think, oh, I'll take this to this talk, and this will be my list if I get asked that question. Oh, well,
That's my problem right there, is that I know I have a great book and I cannot remember the title or who wrote it. I can give you a synopsis, but I can't remember.
we need to go to the next question.
Well, this is I keep laughing, it's Get Lit. We are getting lit in a completely different way. That a lot of people here are writers or would like to be writers. So do you have just general advice for people trying to start out as writers?
I do. Put your fanny in the chair and stop talking about it. I talked about it for a long time because I didn't know how to do it. I thought maybe if I talked about it, something would happen. But I want to tell you, nothing's going to happen. Talk it about it. So why haven't you put your fanny in the chair? Because you are frightened. There's a lot of fear that comes with exposing yourself, just laying yourself out there in a work of fiction. But if you don't have courage, it will show in your work. If you lay yourself open, that's what people ask Billy Collins. Who knows Billy Collins, the poet? Oh, I beg you to get to know Billy Collins, the poet, Irish. So he's asked to read very often, and he said, people don't want to hear you read. They want to know what you had for breakfast. So, metaphorically speaking, of course, people want to know what the author, given what she or he writes, has had for breakfast. They want to know, who are you speaking to me? Are you going to speak to me in some covered, closed way that I won't really enjoy? Or are you going to open up your heart to me so I can get in there and find some consolation? So I just think that you have to have the guts to be yourself. And you say, well, what is myself? You can only know that if you've got the guts to open up on the page. Open up on the page. It's not engraved in stone. You can always throw it in the trash. Recycle it, please. And it feels so good. Now, it's easy for me to say that because I'm 102 years old. And I'm in there, and I understand what a price you will pay if you do not tell your truth on the page. So that would be mine.
All right, this may or may not be your final book. Is there a book down in there, maybe not even a Mitford book, that you have always wanted to write?
Yes, but it's too late because it would require too much research.
Oh. Tell me about it. Maybe I'll write it.
Well, I will tell you about the book I was trying to write and couldn't, and began writing this most recent novel. I'm better than 3/4 there, and I have a deadline of February 1, and my problem right now is getting those chunks to become orderly. I dread that. It's going to be hard. Anyway, so the book I was trying to write was a book my readers had asked for many years, and that it would be autobiography. And I would tell you about my regular life. But again, that just didn't feel right. And I think it's because the timing was wrong. Because I was still, like Anne Patchett, for example, one of the many who read Anne Patchett. She's a good girl. It's just something that a writer wants to do, I think, very often when we get into my age category. It doesn't sell as well. A publisher is not always happy, no matter who you are, with an autobiography. But the author can be happy. So that's what I may do. I do feel I have one more after this one. Just sense it. But I really don't know what it might be.
Now there's a teaser. All right, this is our penultimate question. I just, anytime I get to use the word penultimate, I agree. So, and this is a little bit different. What is the next chapter for the Mitford Museum? We have some exciting news to share. I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you see this next chapter means and why you're excited about it.
All right, remember that question because I'm going to jump to something for a moment to introduce it. There's a woman in the audience today, Anne Everhart Smith. She is our board chair, the museum board chair, I'm glad to say. Anne has made a profession out of volunteerism. After 30 plus years in banking, she now works every day, works an 8-hour day, volunteering, doing a great number of things. And I want you to stand and talk about, give us 3 minutes of how this building became an arts center. Would you stand?
And actually, Anne, would you come up here so that we can get it on camera?
We wouldn't be sitting here today if not for this woman. This woman had a lot of help in making this come to pass. But the town acquired this building, and I serve on the Hudson Town Council in the early 2000s. And we were trying to decide exactly what to do with it then because we didn't want to see the building destroyed. We didn't want it bulldozed down because it's a beautiful building. I think you all would agree with that. And so we had the first part of the building for some time, and we just had dinner theater in here. I don't know if you ever heard of the dinner theater that we had. Well, years later, after we had gone through several different ideas of what we might do, we had a discussion and we decided that we needed an arts center in Hudson, but not just for Hudson, but for the community and for the region. Well, I have always been a Mitford fan, like many of you, and a Jan Karon fan. And I knew that she went to school here. And so I made it my business to try to get in touch with her. And thanks to her publisher, I was able to do that. And I can't tell you, I finally had the opportunity to get in touch with her and called her. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack and answer the phone. I'm not kidding. I mean, I had to get over being able to talk to my hero first before I could do anything else. And when I told her what we were doing, she immediately was interested in it. And we eventually talked her into becoming a part of it. And what a blessing that has been for this community that we serve, because the Mitford Museum draws people from all over the world. And we're just so delighted to have her. And it not only fulfilled my lifelong dream, but it absolutely fulfilled my desire to meet my hero. And I get to see her often. So it is such a pleasure to have you here and to be part of the Arts Center and all that you mean to it. difference in a little town. This could have been anything. It could have been torn down. Anything could have happened. But Ann was out there getting $10, $20, $5, 2 3/4, 100, 1,000, 25,000, 100,000, because it caught fire. Her vision caught fire in the community. And that's why we're sitting here today. Now, when she called me, she didn't ask me for money, but I knew that's why she was calling. So I gave her some. And I, probably shouldn't have done that because
look what happened.
I said, okay, all right. And so they said, we're going to give you your first grade classroom. And I thought, wow, that was my favorite time in school in my entire life. Nan Downs was my favorite teacher of my entire life. First grade teacher. She taught us with love, which is the supreme teaching tool. How many teachers here today? Oh, we love you. We love you. You make such a difference in a life. It's a huge responsibility. And love will do it every time. So I thought, okay, I'll take the classroom and thank you very much. The town gave it to me as a gift to do whatever I wanted to with. We'll just have a place for book clubs to meet. A few weeks went by and I'm thinking, book clubs have plenty of places to meet. They don't need to be meeting here. What else could we do? Well, it turned into a museum because my family lived 2 miles away. My great-grandparents 2 miles away. I'm 8th generation in this red soil. French Huguenots were the first of my ancestors to move to this area. So I thought a museum that will tell some of the history of the place, the region, as well as tell some of my history, because what they were looking for in this was a name. I'm not a football star. What they really needed was a football star. A tight end or what. I've always thought that is the funniest name. I have no idea what kind of position that is in football, but maybe one of you will tell me.
Offense. They catch the ball around.
So anyway, here we are with a museum, and all of you will go through, I hope, right?
By candlelight.
By candlelight. And then, as if that weren't enough, a piece of property came available right across the street. What can you do? I mean, what would you do? You'd buy it, right? We bought it. We're a little museum, and we're a nonprofit, and we can't really afford it, but we can't really not afford to buy a piece of property right across the street. So, coming in 2026, or if things go the way, and they have in my experience, 2027.
I was afraid you were going to say 2025.
We will have the Mitford Discovery Center. A beautiful, beautiful new building with a room for traveling exhibitions from the Smithsonian, from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. There are all kinds of things out there that rotate through the small museum community. We'll be able to have all kinds of arts instruction, especially for youth, but also for people in my age category.
because you can easily, I think, live to be 87 and still not know exactly what God gave you to work with. God packs a lunch for every one of us. And here we go off into the school of the world with our packed lunch. It's like, what are we going to do with it? You can be my age and still not know. The Discovery Center, we want to help see what you've got and then bring it out and let's cultivate it. You might be a singer. You might be a dancer. You might be an artist. Are you an artist already? So that's what we're about with the Discovery Center, because Nan Downs, my first grade teacher, discovered that I was an artist. I was drawing Dick and Jane. Remember them? She came up on my left. I remember it as if it were really last week. Came up on my left, and she says, "Why, Janice Wilson, that is really good. Can I take it up the hall and show it to the other teachers?" I had been seen. I had been recognized. And that means the world to all of us. So that's what we hope to do over there. We'll have a beautiful garden, we'll have landscaping. We even have some good news about money, which I can't talk about. But we're encouraged.
Yes. Well, for the final question, what I wanted to talk about. On our website, we have a line somewhere in there that talks about the Mitford Museum being a place of refuge, learning, love, and laughter. And I actually spoke with someone today, and I would make eye contact with you, but I have spoken to so many people today that I have lost track about that word refuge. And how, especially today, that word has come home. Talk to us a little bit about why you see the Mitford Museum, Mitford in general, as a place of refuge.
When I was working in advertising for many, many years, it's a brutal business. I don't think I'm over-stressing that. Sounds a little dramatic, but it's a brutal business. You're handling millions of dollars of a client's money, and it's got to be right. And so often, you work for weeks or even months on a campaign, you send it off with the account people, the account services people to the client, and they say, and you're brokenhearted. You would never admit it, but you're brokenhearted. Men and women alike. And you start over, and you do something else. And it can happen a couple of times. I mean, it doesn't always happen a couple of times. Sometimes you get bingo the first time. But you can have your heart broken a lot in advertising.
Refuge.
When I would get home at the end of the day, I needed a refuge. What would it be? At one point, for refuge, I wrote a book about a little rabbit called Jeremy. I wrote it for my daughter. Handwritten, hand illustrated, hand colored. And you can buy it in the bookshop because when the publisher saw it, they wanted to publish it. And so I hope you'll check it out. The other thing I did was I read an author named Miss Reed. Has anybody ever heard of Miss Reed? She is a total charm. She was my age when we began corresponding. And she became blind and could no longer continue writing. Her stories are more simple than mine, and they were a perfect refuge. I highly recommend her. Let's not let Miss Reed be forgotten, long deceased now. But there was a refuge for me. And I still use books as a refuge. Honestly, with all the books that are out there now, there are about 4,000 per year published, it's still hard for me to find a book I can go live in. How is it hard for who among you? Is it hard to find a really great read? You want to go live in that book. And so to live in a book, you have to find the right characters, people you want to be with. And sometimes when I can't do that, I just go work on my book until I'm with characters that I enjoy being with. So I don't know what my refuge is now. Maybe spelling bee. The New York Times. I'm no good at words. Can you remember that word? I mean, I'm a number 4. I should be a number 2, but no. Somebody told me the other day they got it at 1.
That's just luck. That's not skill.
That's just... Refuge is hard to find. And so I try to give it to you in the work I do.
And then we here at the Mitford Museum, Jan is here several times throughout the year, but Hannah, who's in the bookstore, and me, those of us who are here all the time, we want this to be a place of refuge any time for anyone who comes. We take great pride in bringing this ethos of Mitford, but we talk about making Mitford real. We want people who come to the museum to feel like they have just visited Mitford. And I think that's where we will leave this conversation. Jan,